You ever walked into a room and felt the air change before anyone said a word? Like the walls already knew what you were about to see, and they just held their breath for you? That's what it felt like that Sunday. The sky was too blue, the birds too quiet. My heels clicked against the church steps like they were counting down to heartbreak. I didn't know. I didn't know? He told me he had a work retreat that weekend, left with a packed bag and 2 fresh button-ups behind dry cleaner plastic. Said he'd call Sunday night. So why did I feel pulled toward church like there was something waiting for me there? I hadn't planned to go. I was tired. My knees weren't in the mood for wooden pews and 3 verses of "He touched me." But something told me, get dressed. Go. I wrapped my hair, wore my plum-colored skirt, the one he said made me look like royalty, slipped on my simple black pumps. No lipstick, but a little powder and my pearl earrings Mama gave me on my 40th birthday. It was supposed to be a regular Sunday. Coffee, a sermon, maybe lunch with the older ladies from my usher ministry. But when I opened the church doors, the music stopped. Not literally, but in me. The moment I looked toward the pulpit, there he was, my husband, standing right in front of the altar. And beside him, wearing thick white lace and too much lipstick for a godly bride, another woman. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I honestly don't even know how I made it to the 3rd pew. It felt like the air punched me. I could hear voices around me, whispers, soft gasps, confusion, but not one soul turned to help me. Not even the choir director, who nodded at me like we hadn't just shared gumbo at her house 2 weeks ago. And there he was. Devon, my husband of 18 years, saying vows with trembling hands, I'll give him that, to a woman I'd never laid eyes on before that moment. A woman who had the nerve to wear pearls. I had to clutch the edge of the pew because I felt my body lean. Not dizzy, just reeling through 10 million questions at once. Is this a dream? Is this a skit? Did he lose his mind? Was he drugged? But no, nobody looked hysterical. Nobody looked surprised. Except me. That's when it hit me. They knew, all of them. The pastor who never looked my way. The woman 2 rows behind me who shifted deeper into her shawl like guilt could go unnoticed. The deacon who avoided my eyes. I sat through the rest of the ceremony in silence. Couldn't even cry. My tears were scared of their own sound. Just stared, watching him, my Devon, grin as he slid a ring, onto someone else's trembling hand. A hand that didn't bear my lifeline. A hand I'd never held. A woman I'd never hated until she smiled like she had won something. And the worst part? The part that still stabs on the inside when I think about it, he never once looked back. Not even after the kiss. The whole room took exhaled joy, and I sat there, frozen. They clapped, like what I was witnessing wasn't sacrilege with a suit on. After the final blessing, the doors opened wide. Sunlight poured in like God was watching, ashamed of his own house. I didn't move, let folk pass me, crowd around them, take photos, hug the new bride. Someone even leaned over to ask me, "Aren't you going to say congratulations to the happy couple?" And I swear to you, I laughed. Right there, in God's house. The kind of laugh that don't have joy in it. The kind that comes right before somebody sets a match to everything. Then I stood, walked straight up the center aisle, slow, deliberate, each step sounding like thunder to the ones who knew they were looking at the woman he betrayed. He saw me, finally. His eyes locked on me like they weren't even sure I existed anymore. He wasn't smiling now. I stepped onto that altar like I belonged there. Because I did. 2 feet from him. "I made those vows to you once," I said, calm as rain. "And you rode home in my car afterward." He opened his mouth, but silence whooped him. I turned to the woman. "I don't know what he told you, but I hope you ain't rented your whole future on a man who can't keep promises longer than a ring speech." She blinked, stiff, like she wanted to cry. I turned my back to both of them, and I walked out, didn't run, didn't flinch, just made sure my heels clicked louder the 2nd time. I didn't go home right away. Pulled into the McDonald's parking lot, turned the car off, and stared at the steering wheel for 48 straight minutes. Couldn't think past the sound of them, of clapping, of his voice saying "I do" like he hadn't already, of the world rearranging itself without my consent. Then the anger came, not loud anger. The slow kind. The kind that sizzles 5 layers beneath your ribs. The kind that remembers every sacrifice you made for that man. every job taken to patch his breakthroughs, every meal cut short when bills exceeded budget, every birthday coupon you smiled through instead of gifts, all for a man who had new vows, for a new woman, under God's roof. I called him. Out of fury or finality, I don't know. He answered, said my name like it was a question. I said, how long? His sigh broke something in me. 12 months, he said. One pain for every month of the year. He said she didn't know we were still married. Said he told her we'd been separated for years. Said he didn't know how to tell me because he didn't want to hurt me. I didn't scream. I just whispered, you already did. He tried to explain. Said, we grew apart. Said the love was fading. Said, I needed something new. And I said, I washed your underwear. Because that's what you do when you love someone through boredom. You wash. You repeat. You don't cheat and then call it something poetic. He didn't respond to that. Too much truth too fast, I imagine. I hung up, drove home, and packed up everything I had ever cooked him in. The crock pot, the cast iron, the 2 chipped mugs he always called his and hers. Set them on the lawn and locked the door. The thing about betrayal is, it don't always come with a bang. Sometimes it walks in on soft feet, speaks slow, and waits for you to realize it's been standing in your kitchen this whole time. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, staring at the wall, not crying, not breaking dishes, or screaming into a pillow like TV wives do. My grief came quiet, like smoke slipping under a door you forgot to check. I thought about every time he came home late and blamed it on traffic. Every work trip with the silence that came before it, every time his phone buzzed at dinner and he flipped it over without checking it. I thought about how stupid I must have looked, sitting in our bed, talking about church rosters while he was out writing vows for another woman. I thought about what a marriage really is. Not the cake, not the rings, but the weight you carry between each other, and how he just tossed it off like loose change. I thought about packing, but it was my house. He was the one who needed to go. I didn't want revenge. I wasn't that kind of woman. But I did want answers. So the next morning, I put on my walking shoes, not out of grace, but strategy. I went to the only place where secrets hate to sit still, the beauty shop. Now, if you want a Southern truth, it's this. If you want to find out more about your life than you knew, go get a wash and set. Somebody's auntie sitting under that dryer has already talked to the cousin of the friend of the person you're asking about. I walked into sheer blessings at 10:12 a.m. Tamika, the shop owner, caught my eyes in the mirror, and her face dropped like a hot roller onto linoleum. Lord Ora Mae, she whispered. I didn't speak, just smiled and sat in Diane's chair. Diane had been doing my hair for 7 years. She'd heard about every ache in my marriage. But this one, she didn't even ask. Just put her hands in my hair and said, You want curls or silence today? Both, I said, and while she rolled and pressed, the murmurs started. Someone in the back said they didn't know he was still married. Someone else whispered that the new bride looked nervous, like maybe she wasn't entirely in the dark either. By the time the steam hit my scalp, I had gathered this. He met the woman, her name was Marissa, while working on a building contract project. Apparently she had a child. About 10 years old, not his supposedly. But word was they got serious fast. So fast he proposed within 6 months. I left with my hair curled tight and my fury curled tighter. I didn't call him again. No, this time I called her. Her name was listed on the church's announcement card. Marissa Cole. Easy enough. 3 calls later, I had a number. I didn't plan to scream or fight. That's not my spirit. But I deserved to hear her truth too. When she answered, her voice was soft. Hello? Hi, this is Ora Mae Carter. Silence. Then, Devin's wife. More silence. She didn't hang up. She didn't deny. Just breathed heavy enough that I knew she was also putting some pieces together. I didn't know, she said, completely. I believed her, because women recognize confusion when it sounds like their name. I asked to meet. She hesitated, but agreed. We met at a coffee shop just outside town. Neutral ground. She wore a denim jacket and came in with her eyes already wet around the edges. Me? I wore my truth and my calm. We sat down. No need for a menu. She grabbed a napkin and didn't let go of it once. I thought y'all were divorced, she started. Says who? I asked. Devin. He said, y'all hadn't been together in years, that the papers were filed and he was just waiting for it to be processed. I shook my head. Not one document, not one conversation, not even a, "Can we talk?" She looked sick. "He said you moved on, that you'd met someone." I raised both eyebrows. "Other than bills and prayer?" We stared at each other for a long time. Two women. Same lie. One altar. Different seat. She finally said, "He told me not to ask too many questions. Said it would mess with our peace. I thought he was just trying to start fresh." I nodded. He started fresh, all right, right on top of everything sacred. Then I asked the question that had been knotted in my throat for the last 5 days. "Did he ever mention me by name?" She froze. "Only once." "When?" "When I found a card. Your anniversary card. I asked him. He said it was from his ex-wife he used to love. He told me to throw it away." Whew! That line hit harder than the day I found out we were broke after covering his cousin's rehab. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a second. "You married a man with a full suitcase of secrets," I told her. "I know that now," she said. "Too late." And then she said something that caught me off guard. "I'm getting the marriage annulled." I looked up. "What?" She nodded. I talked to the pastor. He's willing to help. Said if I didn't feel right at the altar, there's no reason to fake it outside it. I saw the pain in her eyes, but also the knife wound faith that only betrayal can shape. She added, "I'm not just walking away from a man. I'm walking away from who I thought I was around him." Before we left, she reached into her purse and handed me a ring. Mine. My wedding ring. I blinked. He dropped it in my jewelry box, said it didn't mean anything anymore. I took it gently, whispered, "Truth is, it meant too much. That's why he couldn't keep earning it." I drove home from that meeting with Marissa more clear-eyed than I'd been in, I don't even know how long. It's a strange kind of relief when someone confirms that the pain in your bones wasn't imagined, that you weren't crazy, that the confusion, the late nights, the something just feels off hunches were real. Marissa didn't owe me anything. Not an apology, not honesty, certainly not humility. But the fact that she gave me all three? That told me everything I needed to know about who Devon had chosen, not just for a second wife, but for a second life. And what it told me most of all, he had a type. He liked women who believed him, not because he earned the belief, but because he was good at acting like a wounded man in search of peace. The kind of man who walked like he carried burdens big enough to distract you from asking the real questions. He was polished, put together, could quote scripture in a way that made the back row nod, but never lived a full verse outside the sanctuary. I had spent 18 years loving a man whose spiritual vocabulary was stronger than his emotional compass. And it took seeing him say "I do" to somebody else, while still wearing the ghost of my love on his shoulders, to know I had been married to a stranger with my last name. I didn't light candles when I got home, didn't play sad music or scroll through wedding photos. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, pulled out a notebook, and made 2 lists. What I lost, and what I was free from. The lost list hit hard. Trust, time, moments I could have poured into myself. But the free from list? That one made me stand up straighter. Free from explaining joy to someone who mistook it for drama. Free from shrinking every time I noticed he was quieter around other women. Free from looking over my shoulder in my own marriage. The truth is, I didn't lose him. He lost me. The next day, I called my lawyer. She's been my friend since high school. Knew me when I had braces, short hair, and dreams too small for my prayers. She didn't ask questions when I gave her the basics. She just sighed and said, "You want to talk or you want paperwork?" "Let's start with paperwork," I said. It took her less than 4 hours to write up the divorce filing, to do what Devon should have done months ago. The audacity of standing at an altar with another woman while still legally bound to me? That could have landed him in more trouble than he was prepared for. But I wasn't aiming for scandal. I was aiming for closure. I didn't send the paperwork to him by mail. Oh no, I delivered it myself. Not to his house, not to his job site. I walked right up to his mother's front porch, our former family home, and handed it to him through the screen door. He opened it, saw my name, and didn't say anything for at least 20 seconds. Then, "You didn't have to come all the way out here." I smiled. I absolutely did. Because the woman you pretended to know needs to be the woman you remember going forward. He closed the screen slowly. "Are you mad?" "I'm past mad," I told him. "I'm moving." "You really gonna just let this all go?" I raised an eyebrow. "Who didn't let go, Devon? Who packed a whole lie into a tuxedo and called it a future? Hmm? He shifted like truth was itching the back of his neck. I just didn't know how to tell you. And yet you knew how to fit her into our church, our pew, in front of our pastor, and stand there like you never said vows to me. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. I didn't come for that either, I said. I came to return your immaturity back to its rightful owner. He tried to speak again, but I turned and walked off before the words could fumble themselves out of him. Some silences need to be left unbothered. I told myself I wasn't going to tell anyone what happened. But secrets have a smell to them, and before long the church found out anyway. That next Sunday, folks looked at me different. Some pitiful, some embarrassed, some just plain shocked that I came back and took my same third pew seat, like nothing burned down in my spirit, just a few yards behind that pulpit. The pastor looked nervous when he caught my eye. I didn't need him to say much, but after service, he approached me quietly, said, Sister Ora, I had no idea he was still married. I nodded. That's your truth? Yes, ma'am. I looked at him for all of 5 seconds and said, Then let's pray that God forgives the blind spots of men who vow to shepherd others while ignoring the sheep with the deepest wounds. He knew better than to reply. I walked away. It got quiet after that. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that tells you people are shifting, whispering in the dark, trying to add up the pieces they missed before. I didn't try to correct nobody's version. I let truth do its slow work. That's the thing. The truth don't age. It just waits. And when it's ready, it shows up wearing a Sunday dress and a calm sharp enough to cut through every performance around it. Then came the letter, from Marissa. No return address, just a card, folded plain, white. Inside, you were right. You weren't the one who failed this promise. Thank you for showing me how not to ignore the silence between his words. That was it. No flourish. No signature. Just truth showing up again, minding its business but carrying a knife of clarity. I kept that card, slipped it between the pages of the Bible verse Devin used to love quoting. Love is patient, love is kind. Because that's what I was, through everything. And it's why I now live love differently. About a month passed after the divorce paperwork had been delivered. You'd think things would go quiet after all that. That after shock like that, you get a pause, a space to breathe. But sometimes emotional earthquakes don't stop shaking. They just go underground. That next month taught me just how many people knew and said nothing, and how many of them wanted to start speaking when it was too late. Folks who never checked on me started acting concerned. Church ladies I'd baked casseroles for showed up with condolence pies that tasted like guilt. Even my neighbor across the street, Sister Jean, waved me over one morning with a fresh peach cobbler in her hands, and that face people make when apology's about to stumble through the front door without its shoes on. I had no idea, she said. I just looked at her. She knew. Maybe not the wedding part, but the something ain't right with Devin part? Please. Women know. We feel things crack in the walls before they make a sound. She handed me the dish. I wanted to say something weeks ago. But? I asked. I didn't know if it was my place, she said. I smiled then. Truth don't need an invitation, I said. It just needed someone bold enough to speak it. She didn't argue, just nodded. 3 weeks after that, I heard Devin's voice again. Not in person, on the radio. He was being interviewed during a small feature about the new community center build downtown, which apparently he had a hand in constructing. He spoke like nothing in the world had changed. Same polished voice, same rehearsed sincerity. Except this time, when the host asked, "Who's been your inspiration through all this work?" He didn't say my name. He said Marissa's. Call me bitter, but that stung. Not because I wanted the credit, but because I married a man who borrowed my spark, used it to build his name, and now credited another woman while the dust from our betrayal was still settling in my soul. I sat alone on my porch that night and let my thoughts wander through 18 years of him. His laugh, his hands on the steering wheel while he sang out of key, the time he stayed up with me all night when my niece fell sick, the way he used to make the bed, even if it looked like a toddler did it, the way he helped me grieve Mama's death. I remembered all those versions of him, and then I let them go. Because when someone shows you they can smile in your face and still say "I do" to someone else 3 pews away from the seat you always sat in, that's not your person anymore. That's a mirror waiting to shatter. And you gotta stop staring at reflections that disrespect who's looking. I started changing things around the house. Repainting, moving furniture. The bed felt too big, so I replaced it with a smaller one I chose, one that I didn't have to share with his absence. I finally took down that clock we bought on our 10th anniversary. The one I told him ticked too loud, and he said, "It's just being dramatic like you." Funny how I used to silence myself just to keep noise like him around longer. I found peace on my own porch, watching hummingbirds fight over sugar water, listening to the mailbox flick open just before noon like clockwork, folding laundry with gospel music playing just loud enough to drown yesterday out. And then the knock came. Saturday morning. I thought it would be a package. But it was his mother, Devon's, standing there with both hands folded around her purse like she'd practiced the speech in her car 4 times before walking across my lawn. I opened the door slowly, didn't speak. She said, "Can I come in for just a moment?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat in the living room that held more memories than furniture. She looked around like everything had changed, even though most of it hadn't. "This whole situation has been eaten at me," she said. I let her talk. "I raised him better than that. I didn't know what he was doing. I thought y'all were good, you and him. I miss you being around." That's when I interrupted. "You didn't see us enough to know if we were good," I said. "You just saw happy photos and phone calls." "I guess I figured if there was trouble, you'd have told me," she said. I stared at her for a long minute. "And what have you done when I have told you things in the past?" She went quiet, because she knew she had always sided with his version, with his defenses, with his, "Oh, Ora's just sensitive" explanations. I stood, walked over to the mantel, picked up the envelope Marissa had mailed me and turned it over in my hands. Then I said, "Nobody really wants the truth, Miss Ruby. They just want the version that lets them sleep at night without correcting anything." She tried to apologize again, but I shook my head. "I don't need your apology." She wiped her eyes. "I still love you like a daughter." And I nodded gently. "But your son married someone else, in front of your God, and left your daughter in the back pew watching it with her name still on his tax forms." She left quietly, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel rage. I felt peace, because finally someone else had a taste of the silence I'd been living in. 1 week later, a letter arrived in the mail, handwritten, blue ink, torn envelope, from Devon. I almost tossed it out, but old habits die hard. It read, "Ora, I dreamed about you last night. You were happy, and I was standing behind glass watching. I knew I had no right to step through it, but I needed to tell you this. I was wrong, I was weak. And everything I said about growing apart was just me excusing my own cowardice. You didn't deserve what I did. You didn't deserve the lies. You didn't deserve the altar moment, and you sure didn't deserve to sleep in a house surrounded by echoes of my deception. I hope you find peace. Maybe one day you'll forgive me. Even if you don't, I understand. Devon." I folded it once. Didn't cry, didn't smile. Just walked it to the fireplace and dropped it in. Some truth doesn't need to be saved, especially when it shows up too late. Spring came. Early this year. Too early. Felt like the world was rushing to forget the cold. And maybe I was too. Everything was blooming outside but quiet inside. I cooked less. Sat with the radio more than the television. Let the breeze come in freely through the screen door, even when it brought pollen and 1,000 excuses to sneeze. I didn't need much these days. Not noise. Not healing sermons. Not more advice. Just silence, and the ability to finally breathe in it. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that peace draws people in, not because they want to share it, but because they wonder how you found it without them. That's how I knew the knock on my door wasn't delivery. It was soft, hesitant, like someone wasn't sure if they were ready to hear themselves out loud. I opened it expecting anything but what I saw. Marissa. No jewels, no lipstick, no pretenses. Just her, plain blue dress, small purse clutched like she was holding on to courage. I raised an eyebrow. She smiled, nervous. "I know this might be strange," she whispered. I stepped aside. "Strange is a man marrying you while still answering to my mail. Come in." She let out the quietest chuckle, just enough to say she knew how wild it was, too. We sat, this time across from each other at my kitchen table, the same one where Devon once sat cracking jokes and stirring his coffee too loudly. She looked around, took it in. "This place feels peaceful," she said. I nodded. "It didn't used to." She swallowed. "I'm sorry if it's weird that I'm here. I just needed to sit across from someone who knows what it's like to find trust, doesn't live where you swore it did." I studied her, not out of judgment, but alignment, because I knew that look. It's the face every woman makes after realizing the man she trusted didn't just cheat on her time, he robbed her of self. She said, "We finalized the annulment 2 days ago." I nodded. "I'm not good at holding on to things that never belonged to me," she added. I shifted in my chair. "I told myself it wasn't my fault," she continued, "even when the signs started stacking, like every lie had a twin lie hiding behind it." I sipped my tea. "Did he try to talk you out of it?" She nodded, said we should go to therapy, said forgiveness was the holy way forward, told me you were cold, bitter, and always made him feel inadequate. I blinked. Marissa's voice didn't shake. She said, "I told him, that's funny. I sat with her once and already felt more truth than I ever got from you in a year." Something cracked in my chest when she said that. Cracked in a good way, like a release, a shared exhale. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small journal. "This is dumb," she said. I raised an eyebrow. I started writing again. I used to when I was younger, before 9 to 5s and pretending to be someone women envied. Thought I'd write a little more honest this time. I nodded. "That's not dumb at all." She slid it across the table. "This one's for you, just a few pages, if you ever want to read." I didn't open it, just nodded. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. She stood. "Do you need anything?" she asked. Imagine that. The woman who unknowingly married the man I loved, standing in my kitchen and offering me help. I smiled. "I'm good," I said. She hesitated, then added, "You're stronger than both of us." I had no choice, I answered. A few weeks later, Devon's name came up again. Not from Marissa, not from his mama, from the pastor. We sat down together to discuss the annual women's conference. As usual, I was asked to lead a session. I'd been doing it since long before Devon's second vows interrupted my place in that church. He shifted in his seat, looked uncomfortable. I finally asked, flat, "Are you asking me to step down?" "No," he said quickly. "Never. It's just, Devon put in a request to speak as a guest next month." I raised a brow. "Speak on what?" "Faith through adversity," he answered. Whew! If hypocrisy could fill pews. I took a deep breath. "I have no intention of telling the church what to do with its guests," I said. "But I can't sit and listen to a man pat himself on the back for surviving problems he caused." He nodded slowly. I paused before adding, "Let reflection come from people who confronted themselves, not the ones who cast blame in flowery language." "I understand," the pastor said. And deep down, I believed he did. Summer rolled in strong. I started walking every morning before the heat hit hard. Just me, my porch fan, and the buzz of a town that had started to make space for my quiet. And you know what? People stopped asking how I was. Not because they didn't care, but because I finally looked like I was living instead of just surviving the days after him. There's a difference, you know. You don't get to skip the surviving part. But life starts to taste sweeter when it's not chased down with confusion. That fall, at the women's conference, I gave a speech. Not about marriage, not about betrayal, about discernment, and letting go of people who only loved you as long as they could stay comfortable. About truth, and how sitting in pain long enough turns your voice into a voice other women can follow. We don't just survive these stories for ourselves. We live them so someone else feels seen enough to leave before their spirit breaks. After my talk, a young woman came to me outside the church. She couldn't have been older than 30. She hugged me, held tighter than strangers usually do, and whispered, "You saved me from marrying the wrong man. I was almost there, almost down the aisle, but something told me to listen to your story, and I left." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm scared," she said. "You should be," I told her, "but don't stop walking. The road gets straighter the longer you leave liars behind." She laughed through her tears, thanked me again, and I watched her walk away barefoot, holding her heels in one hand like proof that she'd escaped something painful in time. There is something sacred about a woman finding peace after betrayal. Not the kind of peace that asks for silence, but the kind that makes noise just by standing still. These days, I don't flinch when I hear his name. I don't rerun the scene where I sat in that church pew, frozen in my own story. I don't ask why anymore, because I know the answer now. Some men love you just enough to keep their truth hidden. Just enough to be held, but not enough to hold accountability. And some women? We carry their sins like we birthed them. But I set my load down, right on the altar of my own self-worth. When they ask me now, what happened to your marriage? I keep it simple. I say, it died before I did. Because it did. It stopped breathing the day my love became less comforting to him than his lies. And I buried it with my dignity intact. No memorial, no second eulogy. Just a deep, permanent silence between who I used to love and the woman he forced me to become. The house feels bigger now, not because it is, but because I take up all the space again. No walking soft to keep a man calm. No dimming the TV so I don't disturb his nap. No pretending I don't feel alone while cooking dinner for two and watching one person scroll through nonsense on their phone. I play music now, loud. Sometimes old gospel, sometimes jazz, sometimes just Aretha reminding me to think. I laugh at my own jokes, dance in the mirror when I feel like it. Wear colors he once said were too bright. I found myself again in all the places I had muted. And Lord knows I won't go back. You can forgive a man and still leave him. You can walk away and still pray for his growth. But you don't owe yourself to the place your soul stopped blooming. He hasn't reached out again. Not since the letter. That's fine. Some stories don't need sequels. Some books you just close after the last page and put them on the shelf. Not because you hate what you read, but because you know you'll never read it again the same way. And that's what Devon became to me. A closed chapter, with lessons folded into the spine. Marissa. She's doing well, got her own place. Works at a counseling center now. Says she wants to help women learn how to spot patterns before they start calling them people. We still check in from time to time. Not as victims, as survivors. Two women who rebuilt ourselves from the same pile of disappointment. Sometimes I think about writing a book, not because I think I'm special, but because if one story about a woman who survived Sunday morning betrayal can stop another from marrying Wednesday's mistake, then maybe God really is using all of this. Maybe my pain isn't wasted. Maybe that click of my heels walking out of that church was the loudest sermon I ever preached. So if you're listening, if you're the woman sitting in a pew wondering if something ain't right, if you kissed a man goodbye and felt colder after he left than when he was in the room, if you're scrolling and this story sounds too familiar, listen. You're not crazy. You're not dramatic. You're not asking for too much. You are simply seeing clearly what someone worked hard to hide. And that makes you dangerous to their comfort? Good. Be dangerous. Be bold enough to walk out with your pride even when your voice shakes. Be strong enough to stay seated in the third pew and let the truth expose itself. Because you don't have to snatch back glory. Sometimes it falls right into your lap, in full view of everyone who acted like you didn't matter. Welcome to Tales of Ora Mae, where silence never wins. Where the woman with the most shame often becomes the one with the most sense. Where we cry, curse quietly, and carry on. Because what they meant to destroy you with, God will often use to wake someone else up. If you've ever stayed too long in a relationship out of loyalty instead of love, you're not alone. Share your truth in the comments, even if it's just a sentence. New stories every day, honesty, healing, and scenes that hit way too close to home. Subscribe if you felt this one. Because here on this porch, we don't just tell stories, we set the record straight.